Guy de Maupassant, the Coward. In high society, he was known as the Irresistible Signoles. Viscount Gontran-Joseph de Signoles was an orphan and the sole master of a considerable fortune, which placed him squarely in the public eye. He possessed a stately figure, impeccable manners, and a gift for conversation sufficient to be considered clever. One could discern in him an innate elegance, a posture full of nobility and pride, a dashing mustache, and a penetrating gaze. In short, everything that captivates the female heart. He was welcomed gladly in drawing rooms. Ladies adored waltzing with him, and men greeted him with courteous smiles, behind which lay a hostility awakened by his energetic and potent nature. Rumor attributed to him several romantic affairs, which only strengthened his reputation as an enviable bachelor. He enjoyed his life, dwelling in a state of serene mental tranquility. Everyone knew he was an excellent swordsman and an even better shot with a pistol. "If I am ever forced to fight a duel," he would sometimes remark, "I shall choose pistols. With them, I am certain to kill my opponent. I am sure of it." One evening, after a performance which he had attended in the company of two lady friends and their husbands, the Viscount invited them all to Tortoni's for some ice cream. No sooner had they taken their seats than he noticed a gentleman at a neighboring table staring intently at one of his companions. This clearly discomfited her, making her nervous. She lowered her eyes and finally whispered to her husband, "That man over there hasn't stopped looking at me. I don't know him at all. Perhaps you do." Her husband, who had noticed nothing until then, glanced at the stranger and said curtly, "No, I don't." The young woman, half smiling, half annoyed, exclaimed, "What an unpleasant character! He has completely spoiled my appetite. Even the ice cream seems tasteless now." Her husband merely shrugged. "Come now, pay him no mind. If you stop for every bore, you'll never have any peace." But the Viscount rose sharply to his feet. He could not allow some stranger to ruin the pleasure of his hospitality. His friends had come here at his invitation, and therefore this discourtesy was directed at him personally. Consequently, the matter concerned him alone. He approached the man and said firmly, "Sir, your manner of staring at these ladies strikes me as unacceptable. Would you be so good as to put an end to this impertinence?" The other man snapped back, "You know what? Go to the devil." Clenching his teeth, the Viscount warned, "Sir, be careful. You are forcing me to overstep the bounds of propriety." The reply was a single word, cynical and sharp, which tore through the air of the café like a bomb blast. Patrons sitting with their backs turned spun around sharply. The others lifted their heads. 3 waiters froze in place like tops. Both girls behind the counter started and leaned forward in unison, like marionettes whose strings had been pulled at the same time. A deathly silence fell, and suddenly it was pierced by a sharp, cracking sound. The Viscount had slapped the offender. Everyone jumped up to separate them. The men exchanged cards. Returning home, the Viscount began to pace his room with wide, nervous strides. He was so agitated he could not think straight. Only one thought drilled into his mind: the duel. But for now it evoked no specific feelings in him. He had acted as he ought to have. He had shown himself in the required light. People would talk about it. They would praise and approve of him. Several times he spoke aloud, as one often does when alone in moments of intense excitement. What an absolute swine that man is! Then he sat down and began to consider his position. Tomorrow morning he would have to find seconds. Whom should he approach? He began to run through the most solid and respected of his acquaintances in his memory. His choice fell upon the Marquis de la Tournoire and Colonel Borden, a nobleman and a military man that was perfect. Their names in the newspapers would produce the desired effect. A sudden thirst came over him, and he drained 3 glasses of water one after another, after which he resumed pacing the room. He felt a surge of strength. He needed to show resolve, to be ready for anything, to propose harsh, truly dangerous conditions, to demand a very serious, a frightening duel. Then his opponent would surely back down and apologize. Upon entering his room, he had tossed the business card, taken from his pocket, onto the table. Now he picked it up again and reread it, though he had already studied it both at the café and in the carriage by the flickering light of the gas lamps. Georges Lamel, 51, Rue de Moncy. That was all. He stared at this combination of letters, and it seemed to him mysterious, filled with ominous meaning. Georges Lamel. Who was he? What did he do? Why had he stared so fixedly at that lady? It was outrageous that some stranger, an utter outsider, could burst into his life and turn everything upside down merely because he felt like being insolent. And the Viscount once again growled through his teeth. Utter swine. He stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the card. Rage simmered within him, directed at this piece of cardboard. Rage and hatred, mixed with a strange, oppressive foreboding. What a stupid affair. He picked up an open penknife lying on the table and stabbed it forcefully into the printed name, as if stabbing a living man. So, a duel was inevitable. But what to choose? The sword or the pistol? He naturally considered himself the offended party. With the sword, the risk was lesser. However, by choosing pistols, he was more likely to force his opponent to back down. A duel with swords rarely ended fatally. Mutual caution prevented the adversaries from closing in enough for a blade to penetrate deeply. By opting for the pistol, he was exposing his life to serious peril, but in return, there was a chance to emerge from the situation with his honor intact, without even firing a shot. He declared firmly, "I must stand my ground. He will certainly chicken out." The sound of his own voice made him start and look around. His nerves were undoubtedly stretched to the breaking point. He drank another glass of water, undressed, and went to bed. Once in bed, he immediately blew out the candle and closed his eyes. He reflected, "I will leave all matters for tomorrow. Right now, I must sleep to regain my composure." It was warm under the blanket, but sleep would not come. He tossed and turned incessantly, 5 minutes on his back, then on his left side, then on his right. Thirst tormented him again. He got up to get a drink. And suddenly, anxiety seized him. Can it be that I am afraid? Why, then, did his heart begin to pound furiously at every familiar sound in the bedroom? Even the faint, preliminary whir of the clock mechanism before it struck made him start and gasp for air, as if his breath had been taken away. He began to reason with himself. Is it possible that I am a coward? No, of course not, for he was firmly resolved to see it through, full of determination to fight and not retreat. And yet, such turmoil raged within his soul that he involuntarily asked himself, can a man be afraid against his own will? And then doubt, anxiety, and fear completely overpowered him. What if a force more powerful than his will, an irresistible and dominant force, subdued him? What would happen then? Of course, he would go to the barrier, since he had decided to. But what if he trembled, or lost consciousness? And he began to ponder his position, his reputation, his name. Suddenly, a strange desire came over him to go to the mirror and look at himself. He relit the candle. His own reflection in the smooth surface of the glass seemed alien to him, as if he were seeing himself for the first time. His eyes appeared enormous, and his face pale, very pale. He stood before the mirror for a long time. He stuck out his tongue, as if checking his health, and suddenly, a thought pierced him like a bullet. Perhaps, the day after tomorrow at this very hour, I will already be dead. And his heart began to beat with furious intensity again. Perhaps, the day after tomorrow at this hour, I will be gone. This man in the mirror, it is I, and soon he will be no more.
What?
I am here. I am looking at myself. I feel that I am alive, and in 24 hours I will be lying on this bed, dead, with closed eyes, cold, breathless, having settled all my earthly accounts. He turned to his bed and saw himself clearly, stretched out on the very spot from which he had just risen, lying on his back, with the sunken cheeks of a corpse and waxen, forever stilled hands. Then he felt afraid of his own bed and, to avoid seeing it, went into the smoking room. Mechanically, he took a cigar, lit it, and again began pacing from corner to corner. He was shivering. He went to the bell-pull to summon his servant, but, raising his hand, he froze. This man will understand at once that I am afraid. And he did not ring. Instead, he set about lighting the fire himself. His hands trembled, shaking slightly with every movement. His head grew foggy. Anxious thoughts tangled, slipped away, causing pain. His head spun as if from intoxication, and he asked himself endlessly, "What am I to do? What will become of me?" Trembling as if with fever, he stood up, went to the window, and drew back the curtains. Morning was breaking, a summer morning. A pink sky tinted the city, the roofs, and the walls in soft hues. A broad stream of light, the first caress of the rising sun, flooded the awakening world, and with this light, a sudden, almost brazen hope surged into the Viscount's heart. What was the matter with him? Had he taken leave of his senses? Why give in to fear when nothing was yet decided, when his seconds hadn't even met with those of this Georges Lamel, when the duel itself was still in question? He washed, dressed, and stepped out onto the street with a firm tread. On the way, he could not stop thinking, "I must be firm, very firm. I must prove that I am not afraid." The seconds, the Marquis and the Colonel, were at his service. After shaking his hand firmly, they proceeded to discuss the conditions. The Colonel asked, "Do you wish the encounter to be serious?" The Viscount replied, "Entirely serious." The Marquis inquired in his turn, "Do you insist on pistols?" "Yes." "Do you authorize us to settle the remaining details?" The Viscount enunciated dryly and abruptly. 20 paces. Fire on command. Raise the pistol muzzle up. Fire until a serious wound is inflicted. The Colonel remarked with satisfaction, "Excellent terms. You are a fine shot. All the odds are in your favor." And they departed. The Viscount returned home to a state of anxious waiting. His nervous excitement, briefly subdued, now mounted with each passing minute. In his legs, his arms, deep within his chest, he felt a continuous tremor, a fine shudder. He could neither stand still nor remain seated. His mouth was parched, and he kept working his tongue, as if fearing it might stick to the roof of his mouth. He attempted to breakfast, but eating was impossible. Then the thought came to him to drink for courage. He ordered a decanter of rum to be brought, and knocked back 6 glasses one after another. A burning, fiery stream immediately coursed through his veins, clouding his mind. "I have found the solution," thought the Viscount. "Now all will be well." But within an hour the decanter was empty, and his inner turmoil had again become unbearable. A wild, uncontrollable urge seized him to roll on the floor, to scream, to bite. Meanwhile, evening was approaching. When the doorbell rang, the Viscount almost choked on his excitement. He lacked the strength to rise and greet his seconds. He was even afraid to speak to them, to offer a greeting, to utter a single word, fearing they would understand from his altered voice what was happening within him. The colonel reported, "Everything is settled precisely according to your conditions. Initially, your opponent laid claim to the privileges of the insulted party, but he quickly yielded and accepted everything. His seconds are military men." The Viscount forced out, "Thank you." The Marquis added, "Forgive us, but we must be going. There is still a great deal to arrange. Since the duel is to cease only after a severe wound, and bullets, as you know, are no jesters, a competent doctor is essential. The site for the encounter must be chosen near a dwelling, so the wounded man can be carried there if necessary. In short, we still have 2 or 3 hours of work ahead of us." The Viscount muttered again, "Thank you." The colonel inquired, "How do you feel?" "Perfectly calm." "Yes, perfectly calm, thank you." And the seconds withdrew. Left alone, the Viscount felt he was losing his mind. His servant lit the lamps, and he sank into the chair at his writing desk to pen a few letters. Having inscribed on the first sheet, "This is my last will and testament," he suddenly sprang up and recoiled from the desk, realizing he was incapable of collecting his thoughts, of making any decision, of following a single idea through to its conclusion. So, the duel would take place. It was now unavoidable. What was happening to him? He wanted to fight. His intention was firm, his resolve unshakable, and yet, despite all his efforts, despite the extreme tension of his will, he felt, it was clear, that he would not be able to make it to the dueling ground. He tried to picture the duel in all its details, his own conduct at the barrier, his opponent's demeanor. From time to time his teeth began to chatter, a fine, distinct clicking. He decided to read and took up Shadow Villard's Code of Dueling. Then he asked himself a question. Has my opponent frequented shooting ranges? Is he known? Is his aim deadly? How can I find out? He recalled Baron de Vaux's book on pistol shooting and leafed through it from cover to cover. The name Georges Lamel was not in it. However, if this man were not a skilled marksman, would he have agreed so readily to such formidable weapons, to these deadly conditions? Passing by the table where the case of Gaston Renette pistols lay, he took one out, assumed a stance as if preparing to fire, and raised his arm. But his whole body was trembling, and the muzzle of the pistol wobbled wildly. Then he said to himself in despair, "Impossible! I cannot fight in this state." He stared at the end of the barrel, at that small, black, and bottomless hole that spews death, and pondered dishonor, the whisperings in the clubs, the laughter in drawing rooms, the contempt of women, the hints in the newspapers, the insults that scoundrels would hurl at his back. Examining the pistol, he cocked the hammer and suddenly saw the percussion cap gleaming inside like a brief red flash. Through someone's carelessness, the pistol was loaded, and this discovery evoked in him a vague, inexplicable joy. If, upon meeting his opponent, he lacked that impeccable, calm composure so necessary, he was lost forever. He faced dishonor, the brand of disgrace, exile from society. And that composure would not be his. He knew it, he felt it. And yet he was not devoid of courage, for the thought forming in his mind had not yet taken shape, when suddenly he opened his mouth wide, thrust the pistol barrel deep into his throat, up to the very end, and pulled the trigger. When the lackey ran into the room, drawn by the shot, the Viscount lay on his back, lifeless. A stream of blood had spattered the white sheet of paper on the desk, and a crimson stain spread directly beneath the 3 words, "This is my last will and testament."